everybody, it's Justin D. Torres here with the Everything Voiceover podcast. Here we are at episode 2. The first episode was the basics of voiceover. Now we move on to setting up your home studio. I'm Justin D. Torres. I've been doing voiceover for the past 5 years or so. I'm represented by 2 agencies in New York. I've done a lot of jobs, non-union and union, up here in New York, and a lot of stuff with my own home studio. And I've gotten to the point where I can actually make a majority of my money and pay my rent solely by voiceover jobs. So I'm pretty proud of that. And right now we're getting you information on how to set up your studio. Now here's a really good question. Why do I need a voiceover studio? Well, first off, let's start a category of people who do not need a voiceover studio. And you won't need a voiceover studio under the following conditions. Number 1, your union, which means you're a SAG-AFTRA representative or member, and your agent says that whatever you've got as far as iPhone or an Android, the recorder on that is fine. They've given you the okay to do that. The other thing is if you're non-union and your agent says the exact same thing, that iPhones are fine and we don't need a high-quality recording from you, your demo will do just fine. And you're actually risking that the client that you're sending all these jobs and auditions to. Now, a reminder, if you're doing auditions with a union or non-union agent, the agent is sending your stuff to the client. It's not the agent that gives you the job. It's the client that gives you the job. It's the agent's job to try and find who's a good enough fit for the job and have you do the audition and send it to them. And it's up to them to say yes or no. So you risk having a client being unable to see your performance through the quality of your audio. So if you're outside and there's a bunch of honking horns or something like that and you're doing an audition, it might distract the client. So you are taking a risk. But other than that, if you are a voiceover artist and want to take this on as a career, you should probably have some sort of voiceover studio. Now, we're not talking about a huge $5,000 thing and you live in a house and you have an entire closet free for this. We're talking about the smallest amount of space to be able to put a microphone and you being able to learn how to edit and produce work and make money off of it. Here's another big question I get when I talk to people who want to get into voiceover. It's how much space do you need for a studio? Well, the answer is pretty simple. It's how much are you willing to give to your voiceover studio. Some people have zero space. The apartments in New York are very small, and you don't really have that kind of, you don't have a full room to be able to dedicate to voiceover. I don't think anyone has a full room dedicated to voiceover. You know, you may only have a bed and just a corner. But the good thing about it is that you can turn a corner into a voiceover studio. It's just a matter of trying to make sure it sounds good, and it's a matter of knowing where all the plugs are and making sure that you're getting the best sound you can out of a voiceover studio. And also take into consideration that you're a non-union voiceover artist and you're working with non-union clients. They're used to a professionalism and a sound quality, but at the same time, they're not sound engineers. And if you can create a good audio file that doesn't sound like you're near a subway, and if you are near a subway, you could still do it, just don't record while the subway's going over your head. You just want to get your studio as quiet as possible. And hopefully you can figure out like a little sweet spot where you'll be able to do as much voiceover as you can, and combined with maybe a noise gate that's on the software, and you can have it sound just as good as you can, and it'll be more than worthy for any voiceover client. And as your voiceover studio gets better, suddenly your clientele will get better and bigger. If you're a crafty person, you can use the side of a corner or a wall somewhere. If you're creative, you can use your closet, and you can either keep your clothes in your closet or take them out and try and do weird soundproofing things with it. If you're really poor and you don't have that much money, you could simply just put a blanket over your head and try and make sure that you don't move very much and try and read auditions under a blanket. It's very possible. It's a little uncomfortable at times, but it's definitely possible. So you don't need that much space. You need enough space to be able to stand or sit next to a microphone. And the one thing I'd say that you don't want to do is hold onto the microphone with your hand. So you want to have enough space to be able to have a microphone and talk into it without having to hold it. Now, I've made a list of 6 things you need to make your home studio. The first one is the space. You need the space for it, and I've already told you that you don't need that much space. But the thing about the quality of space is also how loud or quiet it is. The number one rule I had when I first started was you don't want to be near any humming appliances. Sometimes you can get away with computers. Right now, I'm on a microphone and I'm next to a computer and there's a slight hum and I've got a bit of a noise gate on it, but it's not that horrible. If you've got your microphone set up next to a wall, next to a refrigerator, you're going to hear that refrigerator, especially even if it's on the other side of the wall. And this also depends on how thick your walls are. If you've got hardwood floors, you may want to do some kind of soundproofing on the hardwood floors. Yeah, things like heaters, or if it's next door to someone's television. These are all things you need to work around, and even in location-wise. Now, I know people can't move just solely for the voiceover thing, and I've done voiceover next to my grandmother's house was next to an airport, the San Jose airport, and every 5 minutes I'd hear an airplane coming over and over, and I had a studio set in an actual closet where I had soundproof towels all over my closet, and I still had to stop and be like, okay, plane, now I'll do my auditions. When I came to New York, I lived under subways, and every now and then I would hear the subways going across those noisy streets. I want to reiterate that it can be done no matter where your situation is. You just have to know what your situation is and know how to work around it. Patience is your number one tool when building a voiceover studio, and you also have a little bit of versatility. You feel free to move it around. Move it around, figure out where the sweet spot is. The one thing you'll need is a relatively quiet space, so try and figure out where it is. The number two thing you'll need is a microphone. Now there's two types of microphones out there. There's USB and XLR. USB and XLR is a term for the cable that goes in from the microphone into the computer. Now the USB cable is the one that we all have. We all know what USB is. It's the one that your mouse goes through, or your keyboard. So a USB microphone is going to go plug straight in the computer and work right away. That's great. It's amazing. XLR is the same microphone cables that bands use. So it's got like a 3-prong thing to it. You plug it into the bottom of the mic, and then you plug it into probably a preamp, because XLRs do not plug into a computer directly. They're not USB. You don't have a 3-prong outlet in the back of a computer. So what you'll do is you'll plug your XLR mic into the preamp, and then on the back of the preamp, there'll be a USB output, and then you put the USB output into your computer. There's preamps are like $100 or so bucks. You know, Mobile Pre has one. I've got one from Roland. The difference between USB and XLR is that USB is less quality. Now, this is not for every microphone. There are probably high-end USB microphones that are amazing. But when it comes to professional style microphones, XLR is usually the standard. You've got things like Neumann and CAD Equitech, and these are all the really good microphones, and Sennheiser, and those are all XLR for the most part. There's probably a USB version of those, but the high-end Neumanns are all XLR. Now, that's not saying that you can't go out and buy yourself a USB. There are plenty of good starter, beginner USB microphones that are out there, and they're easier and they don't require a preamp, but it's something to know. I think that eventually, if you start with the USB, just be prepared that eventually you may switch. When you start making money and start doing well, keep an eye out for one of those better XLR microphones. I have always dealt with an XLR. The XLR microphone that I started with right off the bat was maybe $140, and it worked perfectly fine. It was amazing. So you can get a low-end XLR that's really high quality, or a high-quality USB microphone, which is probably the equivalent of a lower-quality XLR microphone. It's definitely an investment that you're going to have to take a look at and see how the quality of your voice is. And, you know, buy a microphone, take it home, check it out, put it in, see if it works for you. If it doesn't sound that good, send it back. The number 3 thing you'll need is microphone stands / accessories. Now, I put in a microphone stand because you're not going to hold your microphone. Number 1, you're not going to be holding a microphone. I don't think anyone should ever hold a microphone. Got to have it on a stand of some sort, whether it's a standing stand where you're going to be standing and doing it, or one of those computer stands that are tiny. But once again, if you're using a computer stand, you want to see what's on the computer. If you've got a fan on the computer, or if you've got 2 desktops running, or if you've got a couple of laptops running, you're going to hear the hum. And a good way to do that, to figure out if that's happening, is you just lift up your microphone while you're talking and see if you hear a hum when you lift it up. If you put it down and there's a hum again, and you lift it up and there's no hum, then you know that you've got to remove some of those electronic things from your desk. And now when I say other accessories, there's things like pop filters, filters or big microphone filters that are huge little foam things you put on your microphone. It helps some kind of soundproofing in most places. Right now I'm using a Blue Yeti for the podcast. I use a CAD Equitech 100S for my recording of voiceover. But the major thing about a pop filter is that if I hit my P's, now if you listen, I do not have a pop filter on this, but if I hit my P's hard, then you're definitely going to hear it. And it's the difference between in a voiceover recording knowing if it's a professional or not, if they're hitting their P's and it's not, and you're hearing every one of them. It doesn't sound good, and you don't want your commercial having a bunch of p-p-p-p's on it that sound like someone's punching the microphone. The number 4 thing you need is a computer. Now, we're not working with Photoshop here. We're not doing video stuff. We're not doing anything too crazy. We're not even playing the best games out there. It doesn't have to be that great, so you don't need that much. You can have a laptop would do just fine. Now, if we're looking at netbooks, I don't know. I don't know about netbooks. We're talking about $200 laptops. I probably wouldn't, I don't know if you can use like a Kindle. But if you're looking at the desktops out there, the cheapest desktop, maybe even a refurbished desktop, probably can do voiceover pretty well. It's not that hard, it doesn't take that much space, and it doesn't even take up that much RAM or anything like that. It's a pretty rudimentary computer that's not crazy old, should be able to do good voiceover. So chances are you already have it. But, you know, if your desktop is full of viruses and you can get a $200 desktop that can upgrade, then why not give it a shot if you want to? Number 5 is software. Now, the good thing about it is there's a software out there called Audacity, and everythingvoiceover.com has done a couple of tutorials of how the basics on how to use Audacity, and that's a free software that you can use to edit and create all the voiceover auditions and all the voiceover work that you want, and it's perfectly fine and it works perfectly well. So that's available to you right now. Eventually you may want to upgrade to like other types of editing software. I use a Sony Vegas Video because I learned how to edit video when I was in college. So if you know how to edit video, you may actually just want to use the video editing software you use, because editing audio is the same as editing video. It's just plugging and cutting and moving back and forth. There are also plugins that are available that eventually you may want to explore that may take down the noise around you, a noise gate or a de-esser. Those are all things that you could possibly use. A lot of the pure voiceover artists don't use filters on it. I use it every now and then. If you're one of those sound engineers that are like, I never use a filter, chances are you've got a better home studio than I do. So you use what you use to get a better product. The last one, this is number 6, is soundproofing. Now, even the smallest attempt will help. Quilts, blankets. You can go out to Goodwill and get a really thick quilt or a really thick blanket, or use your own blanket. There's nothing wrong with using your own blanket. You can also, if you're using your closet, use the clothes that you have in your closet. If you open up the middle of your closet, you've got 2 sections that are already clothing soundproofed, so it helps. Whatever helps to soundproof a little bit will be worth it. If you take a look at the ground that you're walking on, if you're constantly on wood, you may want to put a bathroom rug on there, or maybe a towel down there. Any kind of covering of above your head or maybe behind you, you want to try to have some kind of soundproofing around you. If you can get it all around you in 360, that'd be great. If you can't, no big deal. Try and get it as close to around the mic as possible. And included on that is some sort of covering for the microphone. There are little microphone filters that are same as the one I told you about, microphone accessories. Like some sort of, there's a thing that I have that's called the eyeball, where you put it around your microphone and it kind of soundproofs all around it. Kind of dampens the sound a little bit. I don't know if I like it yet, but it's worked pretty well so far. Now, the last thing most people ask about is how much should I spend? And money is a big question about all this, and I hate to steer people in the right or the wrong direction, because, I mean, you want to put more money into it. You want to put as much money as possible, because then you can start off running and you know that at the very least you've got the perfect setup for VO. I would rather, if you're listening right now, think of yourself as a handyman. Initially, you're going to start out using rudimentary tools from home, tools you've got around. Maybe you make certain things that are, you know, maybe you makeshift or make certain MacGyver some kind of tool for yourself as well. And as you start making money, you will reinvest into better items. A good barometer with how good you are is to be like, I'm going to buy myself a $150 mic, and then when I make $2,000, I'll buy myself a $500 mic. That way you're not losing money right out the gate. You may want to change it up and move your microphone into your closet, take all your clothes out of your closet and start putting up some kind of soundproofing around there. You know, eventually you may move your microphone into 3 or 4 different places. I've moved from sublet to sublet and I've had different microphone setups. I've moved at least 6 times over the past 2 years. I've had clients that have never complained about the difference of sound between one sublet to another. The only thing that you should put a majority, the highest amount of money into, given that you have a usable computer that's not too old, is the microphone. You want to invest in a decent microphone. Even if it's USB, it could be a lower end XLR or a higher end USB. The first initial investment probably should be the microphone. My first microphone was around $150, I think, and then my next microphone after that ended up being about $600. Now Neumann's, those bigger ones, are usually about $800 to $1,000, and I was gonna probably go for an $800 to $1,000 one, but I thought that the CAD E100S was so well reviewed that I was like, you know what, I'll get that one. And then if I start doing really, really well, maybe when I make an extra couple of grand, I'll go back in and think about getting a Neumann. There's a lot of really great sites about microphones, and I'll probably end up putting in a podcast or an article specifically about microphones. But the first initial investment, what's the most you should spend on, is probably the microphone. I like to say that if you didn't have anything, if you had no computer, no software, no space, no microphone, nothing, you probably are looking at maybe a $600, $700 investment. And the other thing you're eventually going to get is either a year-long or a month-long subscription to one of the pay-to-play sites. And that's a decent chunk of change. It can come up to about $400 a year. But after you have your studio, that'll be your practice ground. That'll be your learning curve. That'll be what you look at every day, 5 days a week for the entire year, just trying to make back your money. So that's the basics on how to set up your home studio. We didn't go into huge detail, but hopefully you have now an outline of what you'll need to set up your home studio. 1, get a space, relatively quiet. 2, get a microphone, USB, XLR, do a little reviewing, try and figure out which one works for you. Maybe try it at home and bring it back if you don't like it. If you get an XLR, you need a preamp. 3, you need microphone stands or accessories, maybe a pop filter, maybe a microphone stand that's either tall or a desktop stand. 5, you'll need software. You can get it for free, Audacity for free, or you can pay for other types of things like Pro Tools or Sony Vegas Video. And the last thing you need is some sort of soundproofing, and that can be just stuff you have around the house. I'm a huge fan of towels and blankets, and if you got old towels or down blankets, the thicker the better. You could figure out some sort of soundproofing. Hopefully this helps out on your journey to become a voiceover artist. Stay tuned to more episodes of the podcast. We're going to go ahead and take on the differences between Voices.com and Voices123. Voice123, actually. We're going to take on the study of acting with how to audition and script analysis. We're going to have a couple of cool guests that are friends of mine that are also in the voiceover community. We're going to delve into how they got to where they are and maybe get a couple of auditions out of them to see what their whole system is and procedure is when attacking a script. So thank you guys for coming to everythingvoiceover.com and checking out the podcast. Feel free to go to everythingvoiceover.com for articles and blogs about everything you need to know to start your voiceover career. This is Justin D. Torres signing off. Thank you all for coming to everythingvoiceover.com and checking out the podcast.